Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second roundtable discussion series hosted by the Become Investible Limited team. Today we're discussing Are you ready for the recession? So we have a nice panel ready for you today. Just some ground rules, house rules before we jump in. So everybody will be placed on mute. That'll be controlled by the host today. That's just to control the audio and control the flow of the convo. And we will be using the chat box feature for all questions. So after the panel discusses for about an hour or so, we'll go into a Q&A session. So if you could just place your questions into the chat box, we'll get to them during the Q&A, right? Other than that, thanks again for joining, and I hope you have an informative session. All right, so with that, over to Kevin.
All right, thanks a lot, Zenon. So guys, in the last session, we spoke about using digital tools, to kind of pivot what you're doing right now to try and get that, can add that revenue stream for yourself. And today we wanna go a little deeper. We want to go into the backbones, to the fundamentals of your business. So this session is titled "Are You Ready for Recession?" Right? But when we think about recession, I mean, yes, we know from those of us who have taken any economics class, we know it's two consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. But it really stems from what Maria Daniel will say is the mindset, right? And she says that recession is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So Maria, I want to just kick it off with you right away. So can you just kind of expound on that? So when you say a recession is a self-fulfilling prophecy, like what do you mean exactly? Focus.
Good afternoon, everyone. And what I mean by that is in business, and I was saying, put away all the economics textbooks, put away all the academia. As much as I have many letters behind my name, I can't say that I am stuck to the textbook. And it all goes back to demand, right? Whether in boom or bust, it's all driven by demand, which is the consumer. So why I always say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy is if we think of the new economic times as doom and gloom, the natural thing for someone to do is to not want to spend, right? You want to be like that hibernating animal, saving, saving, saving for when you don't have. But when you do that, you have now stopped demand. And demand is all circular. So you stop having demand, you stop spending. What would happen eventually is you have now lost a consumer. And if there's no demand, there's no supply. If there's no one to supply or anything to supply for, then you don't have jobs. And then it goes all the way around. So it's not about being irresponsible on spending during this time. It is being a little more, let me put it this way, data informed on what you spend on and how you spend. But if we all stopped spending, if we all said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to cook food every day. I'm not going to buy anything else. Jared is not going to like that statement. Right? Then what would happen is we're going to close down the restaurant business, which then, that employs thousands of people in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is what I mean by a self-fulfilling prophecy. So a lot of the discussions I've been having with various committees, it's about you need to keep your people employed. So if we don't keep people employed, if we don't keep jobs going, we're not going to have demand. And exactly what you're trying to prevent, you are going to cause. So that's what I mean by a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can stop this or we can make it worse. So it's really up to us on how we spend, continue spending, and have a level of confidence in ourselves, which will then put confidence in the country effectively.
Okay, so is it pretty much like a chicken and egg kind of situation? So we imagine things are going to slow down, so we decide to slow down immediately, and then
it must happen. Then it must happen. It must. There'll be nothing. I mean, and it's worse yet in small countries like ours. I mean, when you think of the little ones like Grenada or Anguilla, where you have 25,000 people in Anguilla, people stop spending. That's a big chunk of the population. It's just like with Trinidad. I keep saying, with only 1.4 million people, we're not large enough where we could say, okay, a piece of the economy will go away and it's not going to have a huge impact. So our multiplier effect, in economics, we hear about the multiplier effect, is even more exacerbated because we are such a small economy.
Okay. And of course, Maria has spent the last 18 years advising businesses of a variety of sizes in terms of mergers and acquisitions, their strategy, digital transformation, and whatnot. So Maria knows what she's talking about. Now, Gerard, you have spent a couple years in terms of microfinance lending, right? So you've given loans ranging from 500 US to up to 7,500 US, or 3,000 TT up to 50,000 TT to small companies. You spent 9 years working for a multinational in the oil and gas sector as one of the financial advisors, or one of the financial analysts. And for the past few years, you've been running your own restaurant business, right? So when you think about this recession, and when you think about what is happening right now, especially as your industry is being hit, like how do you frame it in your mind, and how would you advise others to frame it in their minds?
Yeah. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. So I think I'll just need to reiterate what Maria has said, where it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if people believe or don't have confidence in the future, or they feel despondent, they will feel like they need to save. They will need to save for that rainy day, or what might be a storm. So spending decreases. And once spending decreases, then it is going to have a domino effect. And definitely for us in the restaurant industry, which has been a little peculiar to Trinidad and Tobago, is where we had completely shut down our restaurants and retail food supply, right? And of course, this has had a domino effect, not just on jobs, but also on supply chain, because there are a lot of uh, companies and people and businesses that are connected to, and the food industry relies on. So in terms of that, totally cutting out that level of expenditure, I think put us in a really tough position. Having said that, though, given what is going on with coronavirus, you know, I always like to say that when we put investment and assets, it's not for the next 2 years or 3 years. It's you look more to a 5 or 7 year period as a business, right? For that long term reasonable returns on your investment, right? So the thing is, what happened has been painful, but our numbers are looking good. So I think businesses might need to look at the fact that, okay, it was extremely painful. It could be very painful, but it may not be as painful as if, we had crazy numbers and people were dying, and then people really would not be out and spending and doing anything for a very prolonged period of time, particularly in a country like Trinidad and Tobago.
No, it really is. You want to add to that, Maria?
No, you have to remember this whole coronavirus. Let's put all the conspiracy theories aside for a minute. But it's a lot of fear mongering, right? And fear mongering really causes people to not behave in a rational manner. And we have to knock wood that we, Trinidad and Tobago, number one, to reopen our doors, and we're still taking our time. I know a lot of people are upset about that. But at the end of the day, if we were to just take the chances now and end back in a situation where we end up with more cases, Gerard is right. People are just not going to go out. And that is a much bigger negative impact by exactly what you're saying, being patient for a few weeks, holding strain, and then at least people have any confidence that we could eat outside, we could go outside a bit, because that would have been a disastrous effect.
Yeah. And one of the things that leaders have to do now, sometimes we think that leaders, particularly in the political realm, they're not being truthful about certain things. But to some extent, I think the point that we are trying to make is that there must be this positive outlook, right? Um, Especially in bigger countries where what a leader or a prime minister or president says has a great effect on the stock market, which then has a knock-on effect on businesses across the spectrum, right? So, you would hear to some extent, we're not going to call any names, but you'll hear to some extent some presidents or prime ministers being very positive. We're going to get over this. The deaths aren't many. We have a few cases. And yes, we see it piling on, but the negative or fear-mongering talk actually could have a very bad effect on the economy, right? So,
It has to be balanced, right?
right. Yeah, in the background, you have to be taking the action and doing all of the things to preserve the medium to long term. But when you come out there as leaders, even leaders in companies and small businesses, I mean, maybe some of my team might be watching this, but you have to be so positive. You have to be positive because you have to move forward and roll forward and keep things going. The fear mongering and the doom and gloom is as Maria said, is just very self fulfilling. It will impact your team, the morale of your team. It will even impact customers. So one of the things we tried to do over the weeks that we were home was we had a give thanks campaign where we were giving thanks for all of the things that we've achieved over the years in terms of our team, our customers, the business itself, and so on. Because you need that positivity, and you see some of the bigger brands out there doing the same thing.
And I think the positivity, let's put some context around that as well.
Sure.
Because positive doesn't mean that we ignore the situation that we are in, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely a situation where people need to be cautious, where we have to change the way we do business. But change isn't a bad thing. It just means we have to transform our business models for the new conditions. It doesn't mean that we ignore we in these conditions or we ignore what is happening. It is all about adapting your business for a new way of doing business. That's what positivity is. It's
Yes.
about, I have accepted that life is not going to be the same, but in this acceptance, I am willing to transform what I did before to adapt to a new situation.
And just to add to that too, I know we might get into this a bit more later, but within that there is also a bit of panic that might cause you to make rash business decisions that
Yeah.
you believe might benefit your business in the short term or even in medium term, but it may not be the best model or best fit for your business. As a survival instinct, some things may work, but some other things, may not work. For example, we might see very big restaurant chains with extremely high overheads, maybe getting into some deals where you take a big hit on margins to get your product out there. But are you going to necessarily get the type of volume and so on that you need to still cover those overheads? What is it doing to your brand to some extent? What are customers perceiving of your brand and so on? Because in everything we're trying to do, we're hoping that coronavirus is going to be contained somehow. That's a belief that we're going on, right? But what could it mean for the perception of your brand moving forward?
Yeah.
So I mean, lots of people are saying that it's the end of the world as we know it, right? And there's gonna be a new world. But and I see Maria smiling because she agrees, right? Because with a new world, because comes new opportunity. And Gerard, you gave us a nice formula for opportunity, where opportunity is equal to problem plus solution. All right. So I mean, I'd love for Gerard for you to start to kind of map out, all right, how do we think about opportunity going forward? I mean, yes, we see people making face masks and everything, but well, even when we look beyond that, how do you look at opportunity going forward in business?
Right. Yeah, so the entrepreneur is always supposed to be on the lookout for what are the next problems that I can solve and make money from, or in some cases, what problems can you almost create? Products that people didn't believe that they needed, but you've now created, and all of a sudden they can't live without it. So for us now is about what in our products or services do consumers now need more than ever. Now, all of us in the food industry always knew that consumers needed to be able to buy our products to some extent online or to have some kind of online presence. Um, Customers needed delivery for sure as convenience, because a lot of what we sell in the food industry is convenience. I always say, people could make a wrap at home. I don't
Oh,
think it may not be as good as our wraps, but it could pass the test, and it could fulfill something. Um, so this shift that we've seen in terms of solving the problem of getting our goods to our customers, I think should have been happening all along. But of course now, with coronavirus, it has forced us to do that even sooner than expected. So one of the main things is, what are the new problems that you have to solve for existing customers, right? You can look at it like that. And what does your business need to do, right? Um, the other the other source of problem solving is going to come from what new problems are there for new customers, for new potential customers. Um, what does a coronavirus world look like, and what products and services can either my existing business or an affiliated business, a business that is not too far removed from what I currently do or what my current core business is, right? What products and services can I provide to live in a coronavirus world? Um, and we've already seen some companies starting to do that, right? Um, Personally, for me these days, I am in between a place of concentrating on the core business, ensuring that it can survive and withstand, because there's considerable investments in assets there that need to get returns, and especially returns to shareholders, which we will talk about that later on. Shareholders and investors, it could be an aunt and uncle who put money in your business. It could be a bank. It could be somebody, and they would want to know that you are concentrating on the core business at this point in time to ensure that it survives, because that's the business that they have confidence in, right? So I battle with that, and then I battle with, okay, there are some new opportunities out there I can go after. How much of a distraction can I take at this point in time? And those things are going to need investment. One thing I always look at is, how much capital does a business need to be successful, so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot before you even get yourself up and running. So that's the other thing. Right now, um, when people are not that confident in the future, even if I have a business idea, where might I get financing for it? Where is the capital going to be for that idea to solve that problem at this point in time? So those are just a few of the things that you consider with that problem plus solution equals opportunity kind of equation.
When
nice.
I think of opportunity, right, in this situation, here's what I want to throw out to you guys. For these small business owners, the biggest barrier to entry, and Jared would know this before, was location, 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 right?
Yes.
So for you to really set up a restaurant, or for you to get your goods out there, you need it to be in the best location. Real estate
Right.
in Trinidad and Tobago is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw someone put in the chat, your competitive advantage is taste. And that is so true. But before, even if you were okay, but you had the right location, they will come. I could tell you, Maraval Road, where my
Right.
office is, you had to be real bad not to make.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Because location. But here you have this great opportunity as entrepreneurs now, where if your competitive advantage is taste, you will then have an advantage over the okay person because the playing field has now been leveled a bit more. So as a lot of companies, my instinct is, and we're going to do it at EY, is people are going to continue remote working, right? People are going to have shifts. People can see it can work. So what it means is if you have a good product and you partner with somebody who knows how to do the supply logistics, who knows how to get the distribution out there, who has the transportation, you as the entrepreneur could focus on what you do best, which is invent your product, improve your taste. So when I talk about opportunity in this environment, why I like it, it's because the playing field has now kind of leveled a little bit more for the smaller businesses because one, it gives you all a better opportunity to collaborate, share the back end, share the supply logistics, and you get your products out there. One platform with everybody on it also saves that. So when I saw that in the chat, your competitive advantage is taste. I want people to hold on to that. What is my competitive advantage? Going on what Jared is saying, what is the problem am I trying to solve? And how do I solve it differently from everybody else out there in the marketplace? Online really gives you the opportunity to showcase your products much easier than they were before. Because you put it on the right platform and people who would have never seen your product are now seeing it. But here's my warning sign. The fundamentals still must exist. You must be able to supply. You must be able to have your quality standards, even more so, because everything is real time now, right? So somebody tastes your product, they don't like it. It's not even going to take 2 seconds before it's out there. Or they find a piece of something in the food. Bet your bottom dollar, it's going to be out there. And the reverse side, it tastes really good. All of a sudden, everybody rushing for it. So you have to have your back office systems, your supply chain, and that's critical now because you also have to understand in COVID, how have your suppliers been affected? You really need to understand that. And do you now need to have 3 suppliers for the same product? Because you don't know if your supply now is going to be consistent.
So I was doing some research on Zoom, as in Zoom the company, because right now Zoom is winning, and looked at their formula for scale, and it's really 3 things, and you guys mentioned 2 of it already. So you solve a big problem that affects many people, and you focus on the customer, right? And as we talk about focus on the customer, I see we have a question from Elena, and I know Gerard is ready to answer that immediately. Do you think that SMEs should focus more on attracting new or upselling existing customer base, both during and short term post COVID-19?
Right. So yeah, this is something that we've been thinking about a lot, and there's a bit of a cost aspect to it where acquiring new customers or attracting new customers is expensive than reaching out to and selling to existing ones, right? So that's one thing. Can your marketing budget, can your distribution channels and so on, can they, at this point in time when things are very challenging, can they reach new customers within your budgets or your constraints, right? The other thing too is that with existing customers, I think there's a bit of emotion there once you've built a strong brand, and it's a bit of emotion that you can appeal to. Now that emotion isn't like, oh my gosh, guys, we're not doing well. Can you please buy from us? But it has to do more with, the brand loyalty. At this time when things are challenging, your existing customers are probably going to be your best bet for revenue more than any other time, right? And then it's about how do you reach out to them. So that comes back to being online, to having an online presence or data on your customers, data on your customer base. How can you contact um, existing customers? How can you attract them to return to the business if they haven't been there for a while, or if you want to increase their frequency, or even if you want to reward them, for their loyalty over the years. How do you reach back out to them and let them know that you are going to be doing that? Because growth would normally come from new customers, right? Are you going to get new customers now? Probably not with your existing business, or you can, as Maria pointed out now. Some new customers could be sitting down in their home offices, right? I don't want to use the food example too much, because there are other examples we can use, but maybe if you manufacture some sort of good or something, new customers can be sitting down at home, and they need your product. So there's just that balance, and it's really about your constraints, and it's about, as Maria said, the fundamentals. Um, if you reach out to existing customers and you make mistakes, which we're seeing happening because supply chains are being challenged, the businesses are being challenged, so there might be, sometimes there can be an increase in mistakes. Existing customers might be a little more forgiving than brand new ones. So again, it's about, if your back office, if your supply chain, your distribution, and so on can handle reaching out to new customers and thereby increasing your demand.
So it's good that we spoke about the restaurant space, all right? But I want to talk about another industry that's been heavily affected by this, and this being the events industry. Now, Maria, a few years ago, you in EY gave an award to an event promoter, as I think that was the Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year, something like that. So I mean, and yesterday when we were talking, you had some very interesting ideas for how event promotion companies or event production companies can solve that core customer problem of the need to be entertained, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the events is really the tricky one, right? Because we were talking about that. I mean, they made their money by more people are together. Now, more people together is negative. So, if you could think of one industry that, airlines eventually must open up. They must, because people do have to get from one place to the next. But when you think about events, they're really, really affected. So, but what is the problem that you try to solve with an event, right? It's people want to get together and have a good time. Do you need 100 people to do that? Probably not. My teenagers might say differently, but my view is people want to be able to have a good time and share it with friends. So events now, to me, are going to be smaller. Go back to the days when we used to go to house parties. Jared, you might be old enough. The rest of them on this are not too sure.
That is only a little bit older than me.
Right? So in my day, nightclubs didn't exist. Yes, that did, I think JB's was the only one, right? Nightclubs did not exist. Really, in Trinidad and Tobago, it was house parties. And it may have been 50 people, sometimes 200 people. It used to vary. So I think event planners, and we were talking about this, and again, this is where the playing field levels a little bit, because a smaller entrepreneur now can quicker do a little event planning for 20 people. You don't need a whole lot of tables and chairs, but just enough to be able to plan an event in the evening. It's also an alternative to the chefs. So again, you have rent a chef for the night, you have a waitress for the night. What I want from entertainment or event is to be entertained. And I don't mind doing that in my backyard once I don't have to do all the work to get it done. I'll pay for it. So I think what has to happen is event planners really need to relook their business model and see how they can do it in a smaller scale and get their volumes differently. Because I don't see how else they will survive. They definitely have to drastically relook what their business model looks like and what entertainment looks like now. and how you could do that virtually. I mean, we've done enough Zoom lines in my office. In fact, we've never met each other across the region and have a line, and we were able to do it now via Zoom.
It really comes back to what is the core problem that that you were trying to achieve as your business, right? And how can you do that now virtually? And definitely, we're not gonna solve it here, and it's gonna take it sometimes almost takes some ridiculous thinking and then probably making it a little bit more practical. So let's look at a ridiculous example, right? Some of us love parties because we love to go out and dance and meet new people and so on, right? So, of course, you can't have a social distancing fete. It's not going to be like, you look at somebody you want to dance with from 6 feet away and you all dance together and it's the same thing, right? So that's the level of the ridiculous that you have to think about. But then how do you scale that back to something that is a little more practical, right? And for me, I remember there was this game that was so popular. I think it was Sims. So you live in a simulated world, and you have friends, and people were forming these friendships and building these characters online virtually and so on, and spending hours living in these types of virtual worlds. And it was very successful at a point in time. So for us it might be, well, maybe how do you reimagine entertainment in that way? Also with the thinking that hopefully the world is not always going to be like this. So maybe you come up with something that for the next 2 years could build a customer base, or you could have people meeting each other who can't wait to meet each other, after a year or two, or something like that. But again, it comes back to what is the core problem that your business, that parties and gatherings and entertainment was trying to solve, which is probably the need for people to interact with each other and learn from each other, learn new things, experience new things with each other.
Nikisha made a point that it's also beneficial for small businesses to have financial management sessions, especially managing cash flow, which is critical. And I think that once makes me want to take this conversation to our next point, right? So existing businesses, and we talk about restructuring, cash flow management, expense management, and everything. So Maria, I'd like for you to start us off in this with this.
Sure. And I mean, most of these sessions now on COVID-19 is cash flow management and liquidity, right? Because here you have a situation, and anybody running a business knows, again, almost everything in business is a cycle, right? So once your revenues continue to flow, it's really cash from one period paying for expenses in another. Effectively, that's what cash flow is all about, and managing that. And here you have a dead stock. So all of a sudden, that cash flow that was coming in to pay for something that you spent before or you incurred before is no longer there. So now you have to also look at, is the cash that's going to be coming in enough to sustain me? And we do this, when we do this on a professional basis, we always look at 13 weeks, a rolling cash flow of 13 weeks. Use your data to see, okay, really, where's this cash flow going to come from? And then we go back to a very simple thing called zero-based spending. What is zero-based spending? Zero-based spending means that, okay, if I usually spend $10 on items, I'm not just going to spend that $10 again. I'm going to look at critically, what do I need to spend money on? And I'll give you an example, very basic example. With technology, we don't write anymore as much. People hardly use pens, but I could bet you $1 million that most companies or public services are still ordering the same amount of pens they were ordering 2 years ago because it was in the budget and they just drag it along. So it's simple things like that. When you start to critically look at your expenses and what do I need to spend my money on, you want to keep that criteria very simple. What can I spend $1 on that will help me make $1.20? What can I spend $1 on that makes my product different? What can I spend $1 on that's going to make a difference to my business? And the things that, and then of course you have some that you just have to do. So if you kind of categorize your expenses and say, okay, what dollar is really going to make the bigger impact to my business right now? And I somebody just put the topic of reskilling. And part of that expenditure also has to look at, if the source of my revenue needs to change, what do I need to spend money on now and in this period in terms of learning something new in order to generate that revenue? So it really is a complete cycle. And we're looking at, there's going to be layoffs. People are going to look at, do I really need all these employees if I'm going digital? It is going to happen. So it means that, even as an individual, this is actually an opportunity, because going digital has also made it easier for you to be able to probably start your own business. So you have to think about, if I had to use these skills I've learned over the years, if I have to invest in myself because I think my job might be at risk, where am I going to spend that money where I can make the biggest impact? It's almost like the old saying, the low-hanging fruit. Look for some of that low-hanging fruit and focus your efforts there.
I just wanted to add to what Maria said there. And I think fundamentally, all that Maria said was great. But I think one of the challenges that small businesses have is that they may not understand their numbers to that extent, right? So one thing that I always try to encourage any small business to do is to become extremely intimate with your numbers and your data, right?
Yes.
Set up
Yes.
proper,
Agreed.
if right now you don't have it, now is the time, and there are a lot of free tools to use on Google Drive.
Yep.
Get intimate with your numbers, right? Understand where most of your revenue comes from, which products it is, and
Exactly.
resist the urge to say that you think you know because you see what's moving off a shelf, or what you might make the most of, or where you think most of the money goes, because chances are you're wrong, or you may not be as accurate as you need to be for the types of decisions that you need to make now, right? So there's also a bit about I know before we might have spoken about throwing away some textbooks and so on, right? But there are some business fundamentals that right now I think a deeper understanding of those things would help. For example, when you speak to some smaller business owners, they can't speak powerfully to their margins,
And
right?
now about that margins.
Yeah. So whereas you might be looking to on Elena's point about maybe upselling to existing customers, sometimes upselling might have some form of discounting or making different packages and discounting them, right? Offering more than one product and saying 10% off. Do you know what that 10% really means for your margins, right? And which are the right products to put that on? Which are the right products to offer on discount? And then back to the zero-based spending. As small businesses, can we really say that I know I have line by line, I know the expenses that I've had for the past year or for the past 2 years, or the expenses I had when the economy wasn't so great some time ago?
Yeah, I'd love you to sort of zoom in, especially like if you could give an example, maybe your own example of some expenses that could be cut now, and some rational investments that could be made right now. So rational allocations of your existing funds. So if you could just kind of walk through that from a practical standpoint.
Right. Good. I think one of the ones I like the most, because there's a bit of devil advocacy to it, is marketing, right? So a lot of companies, when things start to go haywire, they start to look at marketing, right? So marketing is one of those items that you can cut, yes, but do not cut your marketing in such a way that it is going to impact your revenue, right? So this is where the balance of marketing to existing versus attracting new customers. So I can tell you now personally, any attraction for new customers right now has been reduced, and we've shifted an existing budget or reduced budget towards reaching back out to existing customers. Right now that might be a more efficient use of your marketing budget. And as Maria said, some things like stationery and stuff, there are some things that you may have been doing before that for a time you might say, what, for the next 6 months we're not going to do this, right? And it might be some tough decisions. Some of it might be creature comforts. Right now I am in a place where some of the digital or online services that I subscribe to, I might say, what, I'm going to do without it for 2 to 3 months, because I think that this money could go towards paying employees and that kind of thing. But again, that has to come with very good understanding of where every single cent of your expenses go, right?
Yeah.
And there are some hidden ones like bank charges and stuff. Can you have a conversation with the bank? I was very happy to see my bank reverse my point of sale rental fees for 2 months, right? That's $1,200 there for me. That could help pay an employee, right? So once you sit down and you start to understand these things, then you can act on them. So even if they did not cut the point of sale rental fee, I was actually going to call the bank and say, guys, I would know that you all realize that we haven't been using our point of sale machine. So, is there anything you can do here for us?
Yeah. And when we talk about data, and at the beginning we spoke about data-informed decisions.
Mhm.
It goes even further than that in terms of measuring. And everybody feels that they need a software to do this, to track their own expenses. You don't.
Yeah.
One very successful business that I helped sell to a multinational had no general ledger. Now, I'm not advising you to do this at all. At all.
Right.
Right?
Disclaimer.
Right? Big disclaimer. I'm not advising this at all. But I'll tell you what he did know. He knew exactly for each of his products that he manufactured how much cents it cost of each input. Every time he shipped a container out, he knew exactly what his margin was on that container. And he had no Excel spreadsheet. He had a manual general ledger, which I didn't see since I was a junior eons away. But he knew his numbers. So my point being is you don't need a whole big system to be able to know your numbers. But if you do have something that you can use, I'll tell you what's the other advantage of knowing your numbers. It's not just about cutting, It's also about how can I spend differently? How can I buy differently? Where can I source alternatives now that will give me the same output at a cheaper price? Can I partner with other people and we bulk buy now so we get bigger discounts? So the only way you would know that, and with Gerard's example there, if you don't have the data, how can you even work out what options to give people? So you see in retail stores in the US, they get excited. Oh, buy one for $45 and get 4 free. And you're thinking to yourself, 4 free, because that's all you're focusing on. But if you took the 5 and divided into 45, you're paying the same amount as somebody who's selling one for $5. So you have to really have the numbers, and it could be on a piece of paper if you're frightened about using it. But I would say take this time to really educate yourself, because knowing your numbers, and Gerard, when I do personal investments, I just like you, I do personal investments in entrepreneurs. The one thing I look for is that person who know their numbers.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the time to spend with you. So if you know your numbers and you know what you're doing yourself, then I feel much more confident investing in you.
Yeah.
And that makes the world of sense. And I like that you make that point, Maria, about the gentleman who has his business, who understood his numbers, but it wasn't necessarily digitized, right? Because especially right now, people are rushing to digitize their business, to automate processes and everything. But just like we spoke about before, is that if your business model in itself is already flawed, automating it and digitizing it is just gonna magnify that,
Exactly.
right? And I know that at Ernst and Young, you guys are very big on digital transformation, and underpinning that, sorry, is digital strategy. So kind of just walk us through that process of digital transformation for a company.
Yeah, and I think your best point there, or your biggest point there, is automation is not digital transformation, right? So let me just spend 1 second just looking at the difference. So if before I used to write something on a piece of paper and then I decided to type it up in Word, that is just automating the process. You have not transformed the process. So when we talk about digital transformation, it's not just about taking what you already do and putting it on a computer or adding technology to it. It goes back even further from a digital strategy. It's a business strategy must come first. So you have to understand, what am I trying to achieve? What is the customer segment? What are these customers looking for? And digital is just an enabler to get that experience done, to make it easier, for the convenience, for you to get the data to then continue to improve your product as well, and where to focus your efforts. So when we talk about digital transformation, I want people to be clear. Digital transformation is not just about automating. It is really about using technology to enable your strategy. So the first thing you need to understand is, what is my strategy? And when I do strategy work, I always tell people, when you have a good strategy, everybody knows what that strategy is. And digital just needs to help you accomplish that. So if your strategy is to be a low-cost provider and deliver value to the customer, then you're going to put things in place that's what you're doing. But your target market is not for the high-end person looking for the convenience. And the mistake we make sometimes is, we want to be high-end, but we could only deliver low-end. And low-end is not bad. Everybody thinks that being on high-end is great, but it's not. You have mass production that has a need that you could probably make much more money from in a small environment than ours than going high-end. So digital transformation is just about enabling you to get your strategy executed in the most efficient way. So running to be digital without having your proper business strategy and your proper business model is not going to help you to succeed. If you get that right, then when you put the digital onto it, it just makes it so much better. But you have to get that first part of it absolutely correct.
So Jared, as a restaurateur, how have you been handling this, transference to digital?
So what I would say is that we have always strived to be digital, right? And that sometimes means I would like to I like to say that to some extent we are guinea pigs for certain things in the industry, right? There's a technology company that we work with, and when they want to test any new product, not just for restaurants but for retailers, they would always give us a call and say, we want to run this we want to run this in a shop, we want to see how it goes. And then my team would be like, oh my god, another one of these things, right? It's about wanting to be as efficient as possible, and it's about understanding that sometimes the digital transformation or adoption of digital solutions might mean an initially high capital outlay, but you always have to think about, what is this going to do for us in the next 2 to 3 years? How many man hours can this save us every month? There are things that we've done that have helped people to be able to spend more time in the kitchen or go home earlier. A good inventory system, in the restaurant, for example. We do very detailed stock taking, because by the third day of the following month, I like to know exactly how much money we've made. And a big part of that is, what were your cost of goods sold, right, for the previous month. And that means you need to have your opening stock, how much you purchased and what stock or cash you have sitting on the shelves. So I can tell you two things there that helped us. One, we were able to know how much cash we had sitting on our shelves at about the 6th of April when the Prime Minister said, that's it. Restaurants are closed. I wanted to know, okay, I know how much cash I owe. I know how much cash I have in the bank, but how much do I actually have sitting down on the shelves, right? And all we had to do, the separate managers, we logged in from home and we were able to see in our inventory system exactly how much money, how much cash we had sitting on the shelves, right? And because of that, you save people having to go in and do another count, right? Which could take a few hours, and risking people being out there and so on, right? And I mean, that system costs us about, on subscription, about 100 US a month, right? And it saves so much time for the managers where they're able to focus on other things. Another thing that we have is our reward system, and we have a whole database of information there. What are the most popular things that people are claiming rewards on? Meaning, when they get these rewards, what do they go and get with it? It's also a database of customers who have the most points, who aren't redeeming points, who had points up till January this year and you haven't seen them again. It's one thing to be able to see a customer every day and know that they're there, but then it's the next thing to check a system and say, instead of saying, when last you saw Maria, you could say, wait, look, Maria last swiped her reward system in January. Did Maria lose the card, or has Maria not come back? Why is Maria not coming back? You call out to Maria, oh, I had a wrap, and instead of 5 shrimp, I got 4, and I said, forget about you all for a while. And then you're able to re-engage Maria, So just for my business, these are some of the things that, that we do. But I would say overall, one of the biggest benefits of digital, again, is the ability to capture data and use it in all forms,
And I think just one point I want to make there that I want to stress on, and Gerard's example is perfect. And Natalie just put in something about an investment decision when the outlook is negative. It's what you're investing in and how you use it. And you see, when Gerard said he's using the data he's getting, a lot of people have data, spend money on technology, and then don't use it. And then say the technology not working, but it's your brain that's not working. So when you understand inventory management, this goes at all industries except probably services. I mean, where you use people, but people are also your inventory. But really understanding how your working capital, we were talking about cash flow, is tied up in inventory is real important. So overstocking is a big issue. Even tracking, for example, every time we make a product, how many of it is being returned or how many does not have repeats. If somebody buy it once and they're not buying it again. And the more times you track that, okay, we don't need to buy that product. We need to tweak that product. But it all goes back to, what is the point of having a reward system if two things don't happen? One, you use it to get more sales, because that's the whole purpose. Remember, in investment decisions, the only reason we are investing is to make more money from it. It is not a charity we run in here. We're going into business to make money. You can then do the charity afterwards. Yeah. But the whole point of investing is, I'm investing because I want to make money from that investment. And I think way too often, especially with digital, people run out and make investments, don't install it properly, and then don't use the data that's coming out of it to make their businesses more profitable.
Yeah. So I listened to the advantages of going digital and using digital and everything, especially with the examples that Gerard gave. But when I think about the infrastructure, right? So we, especially us in the Caribbean here, we have very high mobile penetration, right? So we have mobile penetration is something north of 150%, right? So on average, you have one-on-one mobile phone per person. right? We look at our telecom systems. I mean, they're not anywhere. They're not as advanced as maybe China and maybe some parts of the US or the UK and other developed markets. But however, when we look at our payment systems, where we actually close the deal, where we actually get the money into our business accounts, you know what I mean? We have some players locally and regionally that are advancing things, but it's still somewhat in its nascent or developing stage, right? So that's just a few challenges to me of going digital. I don't know what else you guys see.
Yeah, but
Either of you
that
can start.
again is a circular.
Mhm.
One of the reasons, well, we have a number of challenges. So I sit on the FinTech Association of Trinidad and Tobago. I sit on their committees, right? So what we're trying to do is really get these payment solutions and FinTech solutions. And one of the first things have been, of course, adoption. So what do I mean by that? It's okay to have great technology, but if nobody's using it, remember what I said, you're not going to spend the money unless you're going to get it back. So we actually had this discussion on another little forum I did. And it's really about people who are not embracing the digital, even as users. And let's say, for example, any of those payment solutions. So when you go to China, when I went to China, they don't even accept credit cards.
Nope. Only WeChat.
Everybody has to transfer money via your mobile phone, right? And for this to work, for payment solutions to work, everybody has to adopt it. So if I want to send money to Gerard from my phone, Gerard has to have e-wallets as well, and I send it from my wallet to yours. And then we need the regulator to allow it. So there have been a number of things that are actually holding back Trinidad and Tobago. But infrastructure, believe it or not, is the least of our worries. We actually did a study comparing Trinidad's infrastructure to Estonia, which is one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, and we were not so far off. So a part of the issue is adoption, and a part of the issue is the regulator. But thank COVID-19 for this. All of that is going to be fast-tracked now from the government's perspective, from the regulator perspective, and people know that they have to use it. So that's one barrier to entry, Kevin, that you're going to see is going to be greatly reduced, which then makes it much easier for the small businesses to go digital and have online payment systems. It's not ready yet, but it is coming. It is going to come.
Yeah, I think to Maria's point too, there's a big confidence factor. When people with local websites, I mean, we get a fair, I would say, a concerning number of questions about if it's safe to pay for stuff online with us. And we have to say yes, of course it's safe. It's Visa, it's it's triple accredited certification and all these things. So there's that confidence factor too. And I think even before that, I would say our fairly low credit card penetration has also been an issue. But thank God, we are moving towards the Visa debit cards now, where they act as credit cards. So people could benefit from that.
It's funny that we just speak about how good our telecom systems are, and I think I just got cut off for the sixth time during
Right.
during this session.
Right. But having used technology, and I mean internet is a little tricky in all
I have two
different parts of
service
the world.
providers in my house. I have
Right.
two. I used
Right.
to have three because I
Wow.
worked plenty from home, and now with the children having to do school, I had to put in two so that we feel.
Yeah.
I saw somebody raise a point here about the older population not ready yet.
Not IT ready yet?
Well, I don't know what, depending on your age, Justin, I'm not too sure what older means, right? So I could tell you I represent the 50s, and I have never been in a bank. I have done everything digital my whole life. I have just convinced my mother that the iPad I bought her so long ago, I'm going to show her how to pay her bills online, because they do have a real fear because of their age and COVID now of going out. So it's also that time to get them. I mean, I was amazed when she told me, your aunt still have a passbook, and I was like, oh, what? I didn't even think people still had physical books to go to the bank, but
Right.
they
Yeah.
do, right?
Right.
Do you think that part of that? Just reading some of the questions here. Yes, I think that part of the reasons people have not gone digital or online is because now everything will be tracked. Let's be honest here.
I think one of the really great questions I saw here, which we could probably touch on, was from Natalie. How do I make an investment decision in a recession when the outlook for economies are negative and I don't know how long it will last? Right? That's a great question, and you have to go back to the fundamentals of investment, right? And I think that to some extent, some of the fundamentals have been skewed within, I would say, probably the last decade, especially around some of the disruptors and people making heavy investments in businesses that may not see immediate cash flow, or where you may have to wait a long time for cash flow. And some of these trends that that we've been seeing. But the fundamentals of investments, just to put quite simply, if you have $1 and you put in that dollar, you would like in the future to get $1.10, $1.20, right? So I guess, Natalie, your investment decision has to be grounded in that. If I am making an investment decision, and Kevin spoke about this earlier, where now the entrepreneur might be a little more hesitant to put their capital in, or if I go to somebody else asking for $1, right? How am I going to convince this person that within a recession or with a negative economic outlook, that they can get $1.20? And I think one of the first things you have to ground people in is the fact that you're not going to get $1.20. You might get $1.10, right? That's one of the first things. We have to be, I think we have to be a bit more honest about what returns could look like and set expectations there. I think too that we also have to be investing in some problem that really needs to be solved within this, within this environment. So, are you going to come to me with an investment in a new restaurant with a physical location? No,
Yeah.
right? Are you going to come to me and say, you know what, this is all going to be delivery based? Okay, now this sounds good. And you give the rationale. More people are going to be home now, and people are not going to go out as much, and we can actually have less overheads than an actual restaurant and make even more money. And things along those lines, where you think about what for an investor is going to be attractive about this business, especially when your all investment dollars now are going to be competing for investment, right? More than ever now. So what are the trends? What are the ideas out there? Where might an investor's dollar go versus mine, and what makes my investment better or more attractive than other things that we're seeing out there? And that's where it's probably going to call now for a little bit more research, right? Your idea is probably going to have to be backed by a lot more research than let's probably say earlier this year. Especially in terms of trends going forward. What are some of the key behavioral consumer type trends moving forward, and how is your problem fitting into that?
Mm-hmm.
So as we get ready to go into our final topic before we touch the Q&A, and I think this final topic kind of ties everything together, right? So throughout the discussion, we were talking about, focus on your fundamentals, know your business, know your numbers, go back to basics. A good business is a good business, right? So Gerard, when we were having our prep conversation, you made a statement that, that really provoked the team's thoughts, where you said that you pose a question to entrepreneur: are you running a company or are you running a business? So I would like you to expound on that and just, make that differentiation there.
You know, it's a funny choice of words, but it is. I mean, especially this is become investable, right?
Yep.
Investable means that you can package something, carry it to someone. They either believe enough in you, the entrepreneur, or the product that you've packaged and brought to them to invest in it, right? And it means moving your psyche away from that kind of mom and pop shop or kind of hustle, which I think a lot of times tends to be almost glorified or romanticized, right? But that is important because the entrepreneurial hustle is extremely important when you start, right? You need to break rules, you need to take risks, and you need to, you almost need to break. You need to break some stuff to really to have that first level of success, right? But then after a while, you need to formalize, and you need to know when to stop um, almost acting haphazardly and start to formalize. Because if you want to attract not necessarily an intelligent investor, but an informed investor, then you're going to have your ducks in a row. So for me, personally, there are times in my life where I may have run very good, business, and for some people that means you're making money, right? But if you take it to somebody and you say, hey, I would like you to invest in this, they would start to ask certain questions. Well, what is your management team like? You doing this on your own? Yes. Okay. What about registrations? Is this a registered business name, or does it have a bank account? Where does the cash go? Can you show me accounts for the last 3 years? Have you been paying taxes? These kind of things. And this is where running a company, or what they tend to call corporate governance, comes in. So you start out things like, okay, I'm gonna have management structure. I have a registered name. If I have a very strong brand, it might be copyrighted to protect it, and all these different things that an investor may inquire about, or may want you to do once they've made that investment. But they have to have the confidence that you can do it. And I guess one of the best examples I could use is from a podcast that I listened to by Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, and a billionaire. Um, and it's about scaling businesses, right? And his name is Reid Hoffman, and he had Dara from Uber on, right? And Dara was saying that when you start, when Uber started, it was like a pirate ship. You have a bunch of unruly people who raid and plunder. If they're sailing on the sea and they happen to see another ship, they go after it. There's no structure. They take these spoils, they fight amongst each other, and that kind of thing, right? Sometimes businesses start like that. But then eventually, if you might want to have a fleet, or you might want to, scale it up, you're going to have to operate more like a navy, right? And navies, people are in uniform. There is discipline. They use radar to find ships, and they have targets, they have strategies, and so on, right? So, to me, that's the difference there. When is it time to stop being a pirate, acting like pirates, and then start to act like a more formalized navy, right? And I mean, if you look at, you know, I don't know what type of investment a pirate ship might need. They might need to buy more ships and stuff. But if you look at investing in pirate ship versus a navy, you might feel more confident going after the navy.
Yeah.
And
Love
that
it.
goes
Love
back to
it.
the investment question, right? Risk and return.
Right.
Understand when you're investing in the pirate ship, you're taking a lot more risk.
Right.
So when
And
you
you
make,
could get a lot more return. You
and
could.
you can get a lot more
Yeah.
return, but it could be a zero-sum game. It could be I either make money or I don't.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and you know, different people invest differently.
True. That is true. Yeah. Because
So
you
you
could
have
find.
to understand, you know, who you're looking for that investment from as well.
Yes. Yeah. That is fundamental. I think that another thing that people have to get somewhat accustomed to, and is something that I try to live by, where when you're investing, it's really for a reasonable return. Try to look for a reasonable return. That fast dollar comes with a lot of risk, and as Maria said, it could be a zero-sum game, particularly in business. Try to look for a reasonable return over the medium to long term versus the quick cash, because the quick cash might only get you so far.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the stock markets, unless you are an excellent day trader, playing the stock market is not for everyone at all. You're better off putting some of your money in some stock that you think over time could give you a fair or reasonable return.
Okay. Before I get to my final question, I see there's a clarification question here, back on the telecom infrastructure point. In what? Okay, so Maria's gonna send
Yeah, because I don't know if everybody
Marie.
does. I'll just tell you what that was. So we did with our office from Singapore, we did an assessment of Trinidad and its ability to service fintechs. So one of the things that we had to look at is all the various parts of infrastructure, things like mobile penetration, internet, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be happy to send you something on that, because I don't know if everybody's interested in that. And it's a bit technical on the fintech side.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. All right, so my final question before we dive into Q&A, and this is for you, Maria. So we speak about the need to be able to run the numbers, for the entrepreneur to be able to run the numbers to determine if the numbers are better or worse for them, right? But let's say the entrepreneur themselves or himself or herself is not necessarily, like, lots of people have that aversion to numbers, right? Numbers scare them, so they may need to have that business partner or that also CFO or somebody to run the numbers. Like, how do we break down that mental barrier to say, okay, well, let me understand my numbers and be able to present it to an advisor, a bank,
Right.
an investor, or what have you?
So let me make a little separation here. So there are inventors and there are entrepreneurs, right? And all inventors are not entrepreneurs. In fact, a lot of people say the entrepreneurs take the inventor stuff and make them commercial, right? So if you are calling yourself an entrepreneur, it means you do have to understand how to make money from the idea. An inventor takes a problem, finds a solution, and invents a solution. They don't always take that solution and make it commercially viable, right? That's where entrepreneurs come in. So if you are an inventor and you think that your advantage or your competitive advantage is in inventing things, then partner yourself with a business person who can help you with those numbers. But you need to understand the basics, right? You need to understand, okay, if I'm going to make this product, what is going to be the cost? And is it going to be at a cost that is going to be commercially viable, that people could afford it? So, people get confused about numbers, but if you have your own bank account, every time you go to a store, all numbers is I buy something, I'm going to transform it into something else, and I need to know all the inputs involved in that, including my time, my electricity, my overheads. And when I come up with that cost, then I have to look at the market. Is the market willing to pay the price so that after I've spent all of this, and as Gerard said, and I want to make a reasonable return, you have to ask yourself, what is a reasonable return? How much are you making from a deposit in the bank right now? 0.
0.4 or something like that.
5% is great, 10% even better. Again, it goes back to the risk of making it. So I always tell people, oh, I don't understand numbers. You do understand numbers, because for you to just live life normally, you have to understand numbers, right? But you don't need to make it complex. You just have to understand, okay, if I'm making a loaf of bread and a 5 pound bag is X amount, divide that by the amount I use salt, I use baking powder, I should know how much it costs to make a bake. And okay, that takes an hour of my time to make one bake. How much is 1 hour of my time worth? Now remember, the difference is Jerry was saying between a business and a company. It is okay for you to run a business just big enough for you to earn and live off of,
Yes.
because it'll be like if you're earning a salary, but instead of a salary, you're doing it for yourself.
Yes.
And you then determine how much money is enough for you to make and how little you want to make to have work-life balance.
Yes.
So, I keep telling people, being an entrepreneur does not mean that you have to have 50 employees. If it means you could do what you love, not work for someone else, and live comfortably, you have accomplished exactly what you want out of life.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
the way for you to really understand that is for you to get very familiar with what is it costing me to do this. And then you make the decision, does it make sense for me to work for myself or for me to work for someone else? And the big difference there is your risk tolerance, right? Because when you're working for yourself, it is more risk. When you're not performing, you have no money to get. There's no sick day that you're going to get paid for. So in really and truly, this whole entrepreneur business, getting comfortable with the numbers. If you are an inventor, invent and get someone who can help you with the numbers, right? Because there is a need for the inventors and there's a need for the entrepreneurs. Likewise, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to work for yourself, you want to then turn that entrepreneurial skill into a company where you are employing. You need to really understand two things. How much does it cost me to do this? And is the market willing to pay that price? That's just the two things you need to know. Is the market willing to pay this price? Is it going to be marketable at this price? And if not, what do I need to change in the cost of those inputs that will then make it either volume wise or price wise more profitable?
Yeah.
Gerard, you want to add to that before we dive into Q&A?
Yes. I just want to touch on something really important that Maria said there in relation to scale, and it relates to also understanding your numbers. Understand what understand how much money you're making when you are small, right? When you're small before you scale, understand what your expenses really are, because you might think you're making money, but you're not really paying yourself a salary,
The salary, yep.
right? Which is really important. You might think you're making money because you're home and you're using electricity at home. You're not paying rent. There isn't that overhead. You have a brother or sister who's helping you do something for free or at some price that is below market, below minimum wage even, etc. Right? So before you scale, really have a grasp of those numbers, because there's a false sense of security when you're small about how much money you're making versus, if you go to somebody with an idea, you get capital, you now have rent to pay, you now have employees to pay, and you're operating at a totally different cost base now than before. The other thing too, I think is really important, and it's something that I battle with sometimes, is how much money can you make out there? I was in the energy industry for 9 years. So how much money can you make out there and get a company car and all these things versus, really going after your own business, right? And put your business through that stress test, run some numbers or get somebody to help you run numbers and say, if I want to make the same thing that I might make in the market, right? What is that going to look like? Like what size business and scale do I need to have to be able to do that? Of course, money isn't everything. So it's also balanced with, your time is your own, but also understand that your time is not necessarily your own as an entrepreneur, because you might just find yourself, constantly working. And these are things that, you have to think about even more now within the COVID landscape, because I can tell you, I'm sure that there are some entrepreneurs who, might be thinking that, going back into corporate or looking for corporate, if it is available, might seem, a bit safer now. So that's also part of the question of, is my business recession proof? Am I, to some extent recession proof within the business and within what I think I might be able to make in the market?
All right, lovely. All right, so let's get into the Q&A. So Sean asked a question a while ago, and Sean is an entrepreneur in the environmental waste sector.
Right.
And she says that this pandemic has done great things, but we do have a fear on the doubling of efforts to make up for lost time when businesses are fully back up. So one of her services is to help businesses become waste efficient. So she wants to know if there's room to encourage businesses to switch to or add eco-friendly business operations during this time.
I definitely think so. I do think there's another part of COVID that maybe we're focusing only on the business side, but people are thinking about the environment more, right? So there's this whole thinking through that the universe is punishing us for taking advantage of resources. So I actually do think that consumers are more looking at companies who are purpose driven, meaning they care about the environment, etc. I mean, I was even thinking about it now. Since I've been home, I've been recycling right through, separating my plastics, have the two separate bins, dropping it off. But I was thinking how great it would be if somebody had a truck that passed twice a month and pick up all the plastics. One, it makes it easier for people. Two, I'll pay $200 for that or $300. Because if I want to spend my money, remember what really drives spending or supply is demand. So for your business, if you just hone in on, here's the time where people should be focusing more on waste, on being eco-friendly, on having efficient processes as well, which might be cheaper for you. You should really be pushing that agenda to get people behind it so that consumers demand that people are running their businesses more eco-friendly. That's the way I would look at it.
Yeah.
Because there are many people that are looking at nature now and, how different it is under COVID-19.
Yeah. To add to that, um, what we've been seeing, and I think it's because of the size of our market in the adoption of eco-friendly um, goods and services, we do not have that type of scale or competitiveness, or enough people aren't doing it. So it is, there's no price competition, and it is actually driving up the cost of business. So I can tell you that, and it's a choice that we made because of what we fundamentally believe and because of the brand, right? We chose to go eco-friendly with our packaging, right? With the majority of our packaging, we're not 100% there as yet. But what I could tell you is that a simple thing like a box went from 40 something cents to $1.50,
Right.
without price increase to the customer, right? And I believe that is because we don't have enough competition in the local landscape for eco packaging. There are a number of players, right? It has gotten a bit more price competitive now, but we don't have that scale. So what I would suggest is, one of the most important things that you can do from a business perspective is to try to drive down the cost of your eco-friendly packaging and services to the entrepreneur, to the businesses, because that will help them to adopt it more, right? And that will also help them to not pass it on to the consumer, which is what we're trying to do now. We didn't find it right to say, okay, we're doing eco packaging friendly now. We're going to just pass on $1.10 directly plus VAT directly onto the consumer. And consumers, they would sometimes, God bless them, they would ask for things, and then you do it, it's at a higher cost, and some of it has to pass on to them. They wanted it, but they didn't want to pay more. And then on the back end, you're seeing that your margins and stuff are under pressure. So I think what the environmentalists and the companies offering these services need to do is that they really need to try to drive down the cost of doing it so that there can be much broader adoption of it.
But the volumes have to go up, right? So I could tell
Right.
you, office, we made a decision. We are not going to buy from anyone that's not using the eco packaging.
Right.
Stick to that. And we're sticking to that. Even as much as we love the product and we love the food, we said, you know what? We're making a statement. Unless you do eco, we're not buying from you.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
kind of like what you have to push.
Okay, so we already hit that hour-and-a-half mark. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take Adrina's question, but first we want to give Shan an opportunity to speak to the piece. I think she wants to say something, so I'm gonna unmute you, Shan.
Hi, Kevin. You all hearing me?
Yes.
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Hi, Maria. Hi, Gerard, and everybody else who is on the call. So I just wanted to add just a little bit because I know other people have questions. One, I am not one of those people that does eco-friendly packaging. But I do hear you because, and as Maria also said, the volumes definitely need to increase. One of the barriers for them was that the cost of importation was quite high and they had to pay very high taxes and duties. So the government has taken the decision to remove those taxes and duties. So now they're paying it, they're buying it at cost price. However, there has not quite been the that lowering of price just yet. So for me, my company is Sile Environmental, and my focus is predominantly on waste. So I teach a number of waste courses as well. But another thing that the reason why I asked the question is we just before all of this hit, we're going into organic waste management. So Justin mentioned composting. I teach composting, and I also wanted to be able to take organic waste from companies and turn it into compost, right? Which can then be resold or reused, as the case may be. If the company works with farmers, you could donate it to the farmers and so on. But just speaking because I'm in a group with other eco entrepreneurs,
Right.
and there is a hesitation because we feel like, oh gosh, everybody had to make up for lost time, so everybody gonna double up on everything they were doing before. So I'm glad that you both said that yes, there is still a space, but the push has to come from the consumer. Just like EY took its stance, we are not buying anything in styrofoam or plastic. The consumer, which is who I reach as well, has to yes, Justin, I'm also looking at gated communities. I wrote that down. Right. So to push the consumer to encourage businesses to make the switch because consumers are changing and the Gen Z are looking for sustainable businesses to purchase from. We've already seen that. So thank you guys again.
Yeah. And businesses can drive consumer behavior too. You can bet that some of the bigger brands, if they adopt it and start to push it, then it is going to cause a domino effect. But of course, some of them are just and this is not to knock anyone, but they're just driven by the profit factor, and sometimes for them, it's just not there.
Yeah. But I mean, the world is changing now. You are going to get, I think, a much more conscious consumer. And being ready for that, I think, will give people some competitive advantage.
Yes.
Probably because our numbers so small. So if it's 10% of the population, it can't really drive enough change.
Yeah.
All right. So we just wanna get to our final question before we wrap. So this question comes from Adrina, and I love this question. What is your view on diaspora investments and best practices on common platforms for those transactions? So I think I want to send that to Maria first.
Yeah. So maybe Maria could explain what that means.
So I think what you're looking at is going outside to other Caribbean people for investment, right?
Yeah. So Adrina,
having one common platform. So we have actually been toying with this through my planting seeds week. In terms of almost kind of doing a kind of digital funding where people could pitch online, and then you can get investors outside of the Caribbean who, want to make some kind of investment there and pitch to invest. So it's definitely an avenue because there are a lot of people outside of the Caribbean who still very much are attached and want to see the Caribbean grow. But it goes back to some points that Kevin and Gerard made though. It's not just being able, I like what you all call yourselves, right? Being investable. Being investable is real important. We could have the platform, we could have the investors, but if the investees are not ready, it's going to fail, right? So, making yourself investable, because remember this too, that diaspora is going to be a lot more sophisticated, some of them, because of what they're exposed to, than our own people. So they're not just investing in the entrepreneur, the person, but they want to see that you have numbers. I mean, there's a big trust factor when I give you the money and I expect to get a return from it. So yes, a platform, the diaspora, is definitely an avenue for entrepreneurs to get investments from. But you have to show them, as I tell everybody on when I work with the smaller entrepreneurs, when you're bringing an investor in, you have to make yourself scalable. You've heard us use that word. What it means is this is no longer about making profits alone for you, but you're now making profits for somebody else who have invested in your business and put in hard cash. You also have to give them a return. And, I do that in a very simple way. I say, okay, if somebody put in 100,000 and they are looking for a 10% return, you just work that all the way up to how much your revenue has to be, right? So that means I'm looking for, say, $10,000. Again, that means your profit has to be 100,000. If your profit is 100,000 and your net profit margin is about 10%, it means you have to be making $1 million in revenue. Very simple to work the numbers. So when you are inviting someone in, understand to become investable, you have to be able to show that story that you can do exactly that. I don't know if Gerard, you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, that is very true. And I think one of the issues though, and is something that I would like to get a lot more involved in, is platforms like these and discussions like these help people a lot. Of course, there are business services out there, and there are consultants and so on, but just a general discussion, a framework, it's almost like creating an atmosphere of investability then, where, almost at, at the primary school level, to some extent, I found it took too long for me to understand that, you buy something, you add value to it, and then you sell it over. That concept, for me personally, came too late in life, so how do we create a framework? How do we have more discussions like this? How do we build up our entrepreneurs to the place where, people look to the Caribbean, they look to, these emerging markets and say, you know what, they're stepping up their game, they're getting better at presenting themselves and their businesses and so on. And formal education may not be the place for it, because you see it in small ecosystems like families, or we could even say, I mean, this is gonna, this might cause some confusion, but you see it in certain races, you see it in certain, certain people of certain background and so on, where it is just a way of life. And to some extent, we can all do more, I think, within the Caribbean to really build that. And, Maria talked about inventors. We have some really great inventors and creativity and creative people in the Caribbean who are creating all different types of products and services. And it's all about, how do we build up ourselves in such a way that we can present that to people who want to make $1.10 off of $1.
Yeah, I mean, think of it. Anywhere in the world, they could just come to one little country, eat about 5 different types of food, experience about 5 different type of cultures, and we have been able to almost eradicate COVID. I think that sounds like a great tourism spiel right there for Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. Yeah.
Doing pretty well.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks a lot, Gerard and Maria. This was beautiful. So if I was to summarize, what we discussed today. So in terms of dealing with the recession, the first thing you need to do is start with the framework, right? So start with our mindset and realize that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you were to approach it from that, if you were to play more offense rather than play defense, you actually see some positive results for our economies. And so when we look inward into our businesses, the first thing we want to do is start to restructure. So you want to look at our expenses, you want to cut the fat and everything. As Jared said, you want to look at our relationships with our stakeholders, our investors, creditors, our employees, whatnot. You wanna smooth that out, and you want to make sure that you manage those relationships during this hard time, so that they know that you are solid for the good times. All right, and that dovetail into digital transformation. So while everybody is going digital, you want to make sure that your back end, at your back office, your supply chain management, your inventory management and everything is sound. Because otherwise, going digital will just expose the problems in your business model whatsoever. And we wrapped with the overarching point that it's back to basics. It's all about the fundamentals. Know your business, know your numbers. And that separates you from an inventor to an entrepreneur, or as Jared said, from a business to a company, So with that, we thank everybody for joining us today. A replay of this session will be available on becomeinvestable.com next week. And until then, just be safe, wash your hands.
And be positive.
Yes, and think positive. Remember, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you think, it happens.
Let's each do our part.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
All
thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent session as usual.
Yes. Same here, Maria.
Okay,
Take care.
bye.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Thanks, Tammy.